Thank you, Jill. And this will conclude our panel board discussion for today, and all of discussions except the question and answer section, which we're moving into now. And I don't know if we want to combine that with dinner, or if that's separate, and then we'll move on to dinner. Debbie, I'm not sure, but we're going to move into the session now of question and answer, and whatever you want to raise regarding what our panelists just spoke, and please give the panelists let's stand up for a moment and get some blood circulation.
Hands up, don't shoot. Don't shoot. Hands up, don't shoot.
That's going to be placed on the...
That's right. This is much better.
All right, y'all. We can have good blood flow. We can ask questions and make comments. Gary? Yes, okay.
I want to say a couple words on the developments with the unions as well. I think it's important for us to... During the 1930s, and let me take a step back. I think it's worth looking at the period of the 30s, which was kind of the last revolutionary period in the union movement, to learn the lessons from that and how they can apply in this period as well. And one of the things we all look forward to is the publication of Martha's book and the Flint sit-down, which we got. She gave me the Chris to look at, and so we had a preview, and I can't wait for it to come out still. But what happened in the 30s? The unions up to the 30s were craft unions. They were unions built among the skilled workers, and they consciously rejected the organizing of mass production workers. They would not organize them. They felt that it was below the union status to organize these workers, and they really concentrated just on skilled trades workers. But what happened in the 30s is you had a shift in the material condition of capitalism. And it was a shift away from craft production to mass production. When Ford brought in the assembly line, suddenly the type of production was no longer concentrated among the skilled trades, but it was mass production. And the unions, as they existed then, were outmoded. And really, and it took a while for the union movement to catch up with the changes in the material conditions that existed for the working class. And there were certain strikes in the 20s that failed and were crushed. But in the 30s, finally, the CIO was formed. And it took really a revolution. They had to overthrow the old union movement. The old union movement was the AFL. And the CIO literally overthrew the AFL and formed a new union movement. Now, what was critical to the formation of it, and it was a union movement based on mass production. It was a union movement based on the changes in the mode of production under capitalism that met it. But even with that, what allowed for the success of the union movement was the communists. Because the unions, first they tried organizing in steel. But steel was a top-down, but the communist movement wasn't strong in steel. And the steel workers union didn't have the same dynamic. It was a top-down union. But in auto, there was the communists were in the auto unions. And if you look at the Flint sit-down strike, it was the communists and the socialists who led the Flint sit-down strike and who really spurred, and that's where the union movement broke through. That was the success that led to the CIO was a Flint sit-down, which was led by a bunch of communists. There's a big book I read one time, there were a bunch of them, a small group of communists sitting around plotting on what to do, and it crystallized. So it was a change in the mode of production that led to a new formation in the unions to meet that new mode of production, but also it was that within that, it was a communist who intervened to push it in a revolutionary direction to where it could win. Well, what's happened today? There's a change in the mode of production in capitalism today. I mean, people really who haven't read it should really read Comrade Fred's book on, what's it called again? low-wage capitalism. And Fred's thesis is, I mean, what happened after that is, as Martha described, is they then drove the communists out of the movement. And part of what allowed them to do that was that capitalism was sitting pretty, was sitting high. And so, in the 50s, the U.S. after World War II had 50% of the world market was concentrated in the U.S. 50%. Now it's about 20%, or less than that. But it was 50% because Europe was destroyed in World War II. Japan was pretty much, the U.S. had it for a while.
Yes.
And so what did that mean? They captured, and they became the dominant imperialist power, where they were super exploiting workers all over the world. So they were able to pay the workers off. They paid the workers, they built up the aristocracy of labor, and that's part of what was the material condition for the driving out of the communists, along with, of course, as Martha described, it was part of the global class struggle. But let's be honest, the workers, there's always what they call a thermidor. You have a revolutionary period, but then the workers get a little tired. The workers don't want to fight, and so the communists aren't so, they're not so anxious to defend the communists in a period when they're comfortable. But what's changed? Now what's happened, as Fred described it, is under low-wage cap, under power of the strength of globalization, technology has changed the mode of production again. Where it used to be, the imperialism was based on exploiting the resources of the oppressed nations, but production was still concentrated now. Now with technology, they can have what they call just-in-time production on an international scale. And they can produce all over the world. They can produce as quickly, they can produce a truck in Mexico or produce it here. It doesn't really matter to them. And what that meant was that the unions are almost unnecessary. The unions, as they were, as kind of partners in the system, as Martha described, well, that partnership wasn't necessary no more. And Fred describes how really the change in the mode of production is bringing about the destruction of the aristocracy of labor. They don't need it anymore. And Fred describes how, in fact, the value of labor power, and what is labor power? That's the price of producing a worker, has been reduced in this country. Because the value of labor power is always based on the social conditions as they exist in a particular country. Well, in this country, they don't need a high-paying workforce anymore. So they've reduced the value of labor power. And it means wages are being lowered for everybody. And it has nothing to do with profits. Caterpillar a couple of years ago, they had $4 billion of profit. They told the workers, you're taking a big wage cut. Why are you taking a wage cut? Because that's what we pay anymore. We don't pay it. And that's the change. So it's a change in the mode of production. And the unions, they don't know what the hell to do. Because the old relations are gone. And they haven't found a new formation. And we're just starting to see it. And as Martha described, we're seeing it with the D15 movement. We saw it with Occupy. We saw Joe just did a good description. We're seeing it with the adjunct workers being organized. We're seeing new formations, but they haven't crystallized yet. But they're going to. Because and it took a while in the 30s, but it's kind of like the 30s, but on a different basis. Based on different sectors. As Martha described, the leading force in this so far has been the immigrant workers and markets. They got more communist consciousness, let's be honest. They come from countries where communism and socialist ideas are prevalent. They understand the system. That's why they can pull it off. And the biggest problem we have now isn't that there aren't going to be struggles, because we're starting to see them, but they need communists to succeed. You see? They need communists, Because a communist then can take, when the workers start to fight, and move it forward. Not limit it, not be scared of it, unleash it. That's what our role is. So I really think we should feel a lot of optimism. I think there's a lot to be learned from the history, and this is a new period we're entering. It's just starting. I mean, we wrote about it back in 1984. Sam Marcy wrote the first book, really, that talked about it. And a lot of groups feel it's the end of the working class. There's a group here that's very good. Yeah, popular group, they're in a struggle, but they believe the working class doesn't exist anymore. We have two groups like that here. But no, we disagree with that. It's just that the working class is just finding ways to fight back. It's a different working class. It's a lower pay, but on the other hand, it's a more revolutionary working class. It's led by the oppressed. It's led by women. It doesn't have the constraints. It's not a working class that can be bought off. So, but we're going to have a big role in that, let me tell you. Because in every struggle, it takes communists. Wisconsin was a great example. We needed communists there. We needed a bigger party to intervene in action, not to tell them what to do, but to be there and push it and move it forward. We played that ball here a little bit. We can do it. So let's build a party. We should have confidence. We're entering a new period. I think we should feel optimistic about the prospects for the future, but we need to organize ourselves. We need to build up, get more communists, our youth are going to be the revolutionary union leaders of the future. Let's organize and build a party and learn how to, this is a great gathering to cooperate together and to learn how, let's make this regular. And with technology, there's no reason why we shouldn't be a Midwest branch of workers' world, We can operate like that. We need to think about that, especially our young comrades who know how to do it. They need to take the lead and figure this out, and because it can be done. And I think this is a great session. I want to also pay tribute to the comrades who put this together. It was difficult for us to put together, because we're all, I can tell you, all the Detroit comrades are like completely wiped. Because we've been demonstrating every week for the last 2.5 years, and we're completely exhausted. But I think I give credit to the comrades who took this on, and I think it's going to be vital to all of us.
Okay, next, have you meet.
Oh, okay.
Mike.
Yeah, this was really a terrific panel, and I just wanted to mention a few things. First of all, our new issue of our paper is out, and it says defend Ferguson uprising. So we don't bite our tongue. We support the oppressed when they rise up against their oppression, and that most of this issue deals, not only with Ferguson, but the conditions that led to the uprising. And there are hundreds of Fergusons brewing right now across the United States. And there's one here that's even more powerful than the Ferguson that's going on in Missouri. Believe me, we're not fooled, by what appears to be the reticence on the part of huge sections of the working class to rise up. I mean, people are angry. We go out to the streets every week and we talk to people at bus stops, on street corners, we talk on the university campuses. A lot of people know what's going on here. They know that African Americans are being systematically forced out of the city, that we've been denied economic opportunities, that the repression is escalating. They know this. It's just a question of organization and waiting for the right time to rise up and strike. I also wanted us to keep in mind, we invited some of our comrades from Boston. They weren't able to come. But we need to keep in mind, they're in a life and death struggle right now in Boston. And as I mentioned in my presentation earlier today, the branch in Boston was built off the anti-racist struggle in the 1970s. That's how Workers' World was established in Boston. And that union that's under attack right now, our comrades built that union. And they are very, very strong, and they're totally opposed to the privatization of education. Veolia is the company that's behind all this. They're in Israel. They're suppressing the Palestinians. They're here in our water department, plotting how to take it over. We read earlier this morning how they've already signed this deal to refinance the bonds that's going to inevitably lead to the privatization of water. That's why we've raised the question of the banks here in the city of Detroit, and the question of the clawbacks of these bogus interest rate swaps. And it's all through the entire system of water. So we have to keep the comrades in Boston in mind, because they're fighting for their political life there. When I saw last fall that the Boston Globe mentioned, our comrades there and their role in the union, and actually mentioned Workers' World Party and other mass organizations that we've been involved in going back 30 years, I knew right then what was in the cards. Now here in Detroit, they attack us surreptitiously. They haven't come out and tried to red bait us, denounce us or whatever, but it will come. it will definitely come, and we have to be prepared for it. But I just wanted to mention, as Jerry said in concluding, that there's tremendous lessons over the last several years here in the city of Detroit in terms of the relationship with the unions. It was interesting last year. We went out almost by ourselves and started demonstrating against the emergency manager. The unions, we went to them, we said, hey, join us. They said no, they wouldn't join us, but some of the rank and file, particularly the retirees, started coming out to our demonstrations. 25 came out at first, then 50, then 75, then 100. One demonstration we noticed, some of the union leaders came, and they didn't participate in the demonstration, they just stood on the corner and just observed. It's really interesting. They wanted to see how many of their people would come out and how enthusiastic they would be in response to our slogans. And then they had to make it appear as if they were participating.
Right.
And on October 23rd, they did call people to come out, both ASME and the UAW. But it's the same problem. They don't have faith in the masses. They have no revolutionary program. And hey, they think it's the old days. They can cut a deal with the bosses and the banks. They're not interested in the deal at all. They want to crush us. So these are lessons that we have to learn. But we're going to continue, and we have definite faith that most of the working class in this country now is not organized. But that's going to be our job. You see, less than 10% now of working class are in organized labor?
7.
Yeah.
Seven is a private sector.
Exactly.
It's
Right.
higher in the public sector.
Higher in the public
But
sector.
it's low.
But they're working on that right now as we speak.
Yes, they are.
So, we have to organize the working class, absent of any type of class collaborationist position. But, that's our task during this current period.
Okay, all right. Okay.
I'm so inspired.
Take the mic.
Yeah.
Well, this is on a Facebook note, I'm very inspired by our solidarity as well. I'd like to take a picture to give greetings to Ferguson, that we're with them all the way. And I took a picture organized by Teresa in Chicago, and it's now making its way through the Facebook world. I think I'd like to do this now.
Okay, hands up! Don't shoot!
Hold the paper up.
I guess we should all, I don't tag anyone. No one gets tagged.
Oh, you can tag me. Susan, you can tag me.
All right.
Get in there, let's hit
Come on over here. Let's go. Fighters, all ages.
Watch the equipment back here.
Get in front of him.
Okay, someone couldn't resist.
I want to just be in it too. I'm sorry. Okay.
Hands up.
Don't shoot!
Hands up.
Don't shoot!
Hands up.
All right.
Thank you.
For you, you had mentioned at the Food is the Right conference about, and here as well, about Cuba and the health system there, and about the movie Salud. And you mentioned, at least at the health conference, Dr. Luther Castillo, Garifuna doctor from Honduras. And we've had a really good relationship with him and brought him to Wisconsin a couple of times. And one of those times we had him in Waukesha, and the University, Carroll University in Waukesha produces a magazine called El Coloso, and it's produced by the Spanish-speaking students and the journalism students together. Anyways, I just wanted to give you this profile.
You pass?
I'll pass it
Okay,
down.
Tom.
I'll come back.
The first thing I want to say is I'm really glad for Jerry's comments. Initially, what I was going to raise were those, as opposed to just, like as you mentioned, the defeats of the working class in general, I guess which you could say began in 1978, before Reaganism, before Reagan. There hasn't really been much talk about the objective factors, the high-tech revolution, so I'm really glad that you brought that up. But something else on what you said, where the opening shots of what's known as the Cold War, the talk, wasn't it in Iowa that Churchill made the talk about, Missouri, that he made the comments about the Iron Curtain. Right at the end of World War II, Churchill he came up with an idea, which it's known as Operation Unthinkable, which is a really apt name for it, which was the surprise attack on the Soviet Union directly after the defeat of Germany in World War II. But the only reason why that didn't really come to fruition is because the United States was a little tied up at the moment still, so they never quite got around to Operation Unthinkable. And one thing on the cuts in food stamps and on food, when I was living on my own about a year ago, I used to get $200 a month in food stamps, and that's because the state, I never informed the state that I did actually have a job, so I was, whoops, well. I mean, basically Sean Hannity's worst nightmare, a communist taking, money from the state like that. But I was getting $200 a month, and it was just out of nowhere. I remember being brought down to $176 a month, which really when all I'm doing is the only food that I eat is what comes from food stamps. And I was feeding another person with it. That's a really considerable drop in what you eat, especially when I was on the $200 a month. By the last week of the month, that's when it was pretty much just rice, rice and beans by that point. So yeah, I can only imagine, I guess in my own home where I'm living now with my mom, she has 3 children, 1 7, 1 6, 1 5. So a household of 6 living on 20 grand a year roughly. When you get a drastic cut percentage-wise, almost 25% in your benefits, that makes an absolute world of difference to what you eat.
Okay.
David?
David and then Leroy.
Real briefly, back to the union leadership as it is. I remember in the 70s that an amazing when the attacks on the union started to escalate, and there was an amazing document that came out from the president's office at the time of the UAW, and it bemoaned the one-sided class war that was being waged against the unions. And it said a lot of true stuff, but they were complaining about being attacked and ignoring the fact that it was one-sided. Why? Because they failed to provide the other side. So it's clear, but the fact they even mentioned class war was remarkable. So I'm looking at the email announcement of the annual Labor Legacy Luncheon here, which all the union leaders, has anybody else seen this? The headline, the title of it is, Labor is not a commodity. Or it might have been workers are not a commodity. Labor is not a commodity. But this is, if you've studied any Marxism, you know that that's exactly what it is. It's a special commodity because it creates value, but it's a commodity. And again, but it's the same thing. It's bemoaning being treated as a commodity instead of respected as a human being. But they've abandoned all Marxism in this and have no way to fight back except complain that we're being treated badly. But the language was so hilarious to me. I thought, gee, if I really want to get a reputation, make a leaflet about Marxism and commodities and labor and take it to this luncheon and educate them.
Our classes have no
Right.
price of-
Anyway, that's all I have.
Right, they're taking, and that's a Leroy.
Should invite them to our Marxist class.
Right, we've been studying.
On wage, labor, and capital.
But it only helps if they have a will to struggle.
That's true.
And they've lost that will to struggle.
Thank you. This is for the professor who discussed the health issues and the value of healthy food preventive medicine and medical care and so forth, people still go bankrupt over medical bills. That's still the number one cause, and healthcare reform hasn't fixed that yet. A professor did a study of the healthful or non-healthful nature of the American diet compared to the Japanese World War II internment camp diet and calculated the death rates. Which one had the worst death rate? If you were in the Japanese internment camp or back here in America? Higher death rate here. That's not a good thing. So that's extreme. And lastly, on preventive medicine, that is extremely essential. Because when people, recognize that capitalists abuse people, they treat workers as commodities and so forth, there's one group of capitalists that's even worse. They're the capitalists who kill us, the tobacco pushers. And so they are sabotaging preventive medicine every step of the way. And so what would be really nice is to know that the United States is a leader on the International Treaty Against Tobacco. And it is in no way so. Every country except the United States, I believe, has signed on to that. So that one group of people can oppress you by even killing you and making you pay for the poison. Even during the Holocaust, nobody was billed for the poison.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Looks like everybody's ready to eat. So, that's great. Let's thank all of our panelists.